Far away from Earth, deep in the cold darkness of space, a single human ship named USS Valiant moved quietly through the stars. It was not a large ship compared to others in the galaxy, but every person on board carried the pride of their world. Captain Marcus Hale stood at the bridge, his eyes calm, his face lit by the soft glow of the control panels. He was a man of few words, known for his sharp thinking and steady heart. For weeks, the crew had been on a peaceful exploration mission, collecting data about nearby star systems. None of them knew that this simple journey would soon turn into a moment that would be remembered across the galaxy. On the edge of known space, the Galactic Empire ruled with an iron hand. The Empire was ancient, powerful, and arrogant. Its fleet stretched across hundreds of worlds, and its soldiers had crushed every species that dared to resist. To them, new civilizations were just another name to add to their long list of conquered planets. When their sensors detected an unknown ship entering their territory, they paid little attention at first. The readings showed it was small and slow compared to their warships, but curiosity made them send a fleet to investigate. They wanted to see who had entered their space without permission. In the command ship Imperator's Wrath, Admiral Zarthan received the report. He was tall, cold, and proud, a commander who had never lost a battle. When he looked at the holographic display of the human ship, he smiled with amusement. Primitive design, he said. No real weapons, probably a mining vessel or a scout. Around him, his officers laughed softly, their eyes full of arrogance. To them, this was not an enemy. It was entertainment. Still, the Admiral decided to intercept. The Empire liked to make examples out of those who broke their laws. Meanwhile, on the Valiant, the radar screens lit up with several contacts. Captain, multiple ships approaching, large ones, reported Lieutenant Sarah Kim. The crew exchanged worried glances. The readings showed at least 50 massive vessels, each one large enough to hold thousands of soldiers. Marcus Hale took a deep breath. "Stay calm," he said. "Open communication channels. Let's talk before we assume the worst." His voice was firm but kind. The Valiant's crew trusted him completely. They knew he believed that peace should always come before war. The communication line opened, and a deep, proud voice filled the room. "Unknown vessel, this is Admiral Zarthan of the Galactic Empire. You are trespassing in Imperial territory. Identify yourself immediately or be destroyed." The threat was clear, and the tone was full of superiority. Captain Hale stepped closer to the console. "This is Captain Marcus Hale of the human ship Valiant, representing the planet Earth," he replied calmly. "We come in peace. We didn't know this space was claimed. We seek only exploration and knowledge." His words were honest and respectful. There was a pause. Then laughter echoed through the channel. "Peace?" the Admiral said mockingly. "You come in peace, yet you dare enter the Empire's domain without permission? How naive. Your world will soon learn its place." The communication ended abruptly. On the bridge of the Valiant, silence followed. Every crew member understood the situation. They were facing an empire that wanted to crush them, not negotiate with them. Yet no one panicked. Hale's calm presence filled them with courage. "We don't fire unless fired upon," he said softly. "Humanity's first contact will not be one of aggression." Back in the Empire's fleet, the Admiral prepared his ships for a show of power. The Imperator's Wrath moved closer, its giant cannons glowing with energy. The Empire's standard procedure was to intimidate, to make their opponents surrender without a fight. Admiral Zarthan sent another message, an ultimatum. "Surrender your vessel and submit your planet's coordinates. Failure to comply will result in your destruction." To him, this was not a choice. It was an order. Inside the Valiant, Captain Hale listened carefully. He knew they could not win in a direct battle. The enemy was too powerful, too many. But surrendering was not an option either. He turned to his crew. "They think we are weak," he said quietly. "They think humans will kneel. But they are wrong. We will stand our ground with dignity." The crew nodded, determination shining in their eyes. They were scientists, engineers, and explorers, and not soldiers. But in that moment, they became defenders of their entire species' honor. Outside, the Imperial fleet surrounded the Valiant. 50 enormous ships floated like predators around a single small target. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. Inside the human ship, tension was high, but the air was filled with a strange sense of unity. Every person knew their role, every system was ready. The engineer checked the power core. The pilot held steady course. and the communications officer kept the signal open in case peace was still possible. Admiral Zarthan watched with amusement as the small human ship refused to flee. "How brave," he said sarcastically. "They don't even know what's about to happen." But beneath his arrogance, a tiny seed of curiosity grew. Something about the humans' confidence felt unsettling. They were surrounded, outnumbered, yet their ship didn't move an inch. It didn't broadcast panic or fear. It simply waited, silent and calm. For an empire that had always ruled through fear, that kind of courage was strange. Captain Hale finally sent one last message. His voice was steady, but it carried the weight of all humanity. "We do not surrender. We will not attack, but we will defend ourselves if forced. Humanity means no harm, but we will not be treated as slaves." Then he cut the communication and turned to his crew. "They'll make their move soon," he said. "Stay focused. Remember who we are." Around him, the crew stood at their stations, hearts pounding but minds clear. Outside, the Empire prepared to fire. The Imperator's wrath charged its main cannon, a beam capable of tearing through planets. The glow of its energy weapon painted the dark void with deadly light. On every Imperial ship, officers watched eagerly, expecting the human vessel to be erased in seconds. But aboard the Valiant, no one screamed. No one ran. The humans stood together, facing the impossible with quiet strength. As the energy charge grew brighter, Captain Hale whispered to himself, "Let's show them what it means to be human." That moment, frozen in time, would later be remembered as the calm before history changed forever. The sensors on the Valiant flickered with strange readings, energy levels rising from deep within the ship. The Empire didn't understand what they were seeing, but they should have known. Humans were never as weak as they looked. Far across the galaxy, the Valiant's signal reached Earth. Command received the data, a message filled with tension and bravery. The people of Earth didn't yet know what was happening, but one thing was certain. Their lone ship had just stood face to face with the largest empire in the known universe, refusing to bow down. It was not just a moment of defiance. It was a statement of human spirit. The Galactic Empire, proud and confident, had no idea that this small encounter would soon shake their power to its core. For centuries they had crushed every species that opposed them, but they had never met humans. A people whose history was built on survival, on courage, on never giving up even when the odds were impossible. The stage was set for a moment that would echo across the stars, the day arrogance would meet human will. In the quiet before the storm, Captain Hale stood still, looking at the endless stars ahead. "If this is the end," he thought, "let it be one worth remembering." The Valiant floated alone among giants, but in its heart burned the spirit of an entire world. And soon the galaxy would learn that the smallest spark can light the darkest sky. The air inside the USS Valiant was tense. Every sound, every beep of a console, every hum of an engine, seemed louder than usual. The Galactic Empire's fleet surrounded the human ship like a steel cage. 50 massive vessels pointed their weapons toward one small target. But even in the face of such impossible odds, Captain Marcus Hale stood calmly at the center of the bridge. His crew looked to him for strength, and he gave it to them through his silence and composure. His heart was steady, but his mind was racing. He knew what was coming next. The Empire would not accept peace. They would issue an ultimatum. And humans would have to choose, surrender or stand tall. A message blinked on the main screen. It was from the Imperial flagship Imperator's Wrath. The face of Admiral Zarthan appeared, his golden armor shining, his expression filled with arrogance. "Human vessel," he began, his voice cold and sharp, "you have entered the sacred territory of the Galactic Empire. You will power down your weapons, surrender your ship, and transmit the location of your home planet immediately." His tone carried no room for negotiation. "If you comply, your species may be spared. If you refuse," he smiled darkly, "you will be destroyed." The crew on the Valiant exchanged nervous looks. Lieutenant Sarah Kim clenched her fists, her voice trembling as she whispered, "He's not giving us any chance, Captain." Hale's eyes stayed fixed on the screen. "He doesn't want peace," he said quietly. "He wants obedience." For a long moment he said nothing more. The bridge was filled with silence, broken only by the faint hum of machinery. Then Hale stepped forward and pressed the communication button. Admiral Zarthan, he said calmly. "This is Captain Marcus Hale of Earth. Humanity does not surrender. We come in peace, but we do not bow." His voice was firm but respectful, carrying a strength that made even his crew straighten their backs with pride. There was no reply, only the sound of mocking laughter echoing through the speaker. Then the transmission cut off. On the Imperial ship, Admiral Zarthan turned to his officers. "Pathetic," he said. "They dare defy the Empire? Fire a warning shot. Let them see the power they face." Moments later, one of the Empire's cruisers powered up its energy cannons. A huge blast of light streaked past the Valiant, missing by only a few kilometers. The explosion rippled through space like thunder. The crew flinched, their hearts pounding, but Hale remained calm. "They're trying to scare us," he said. "Don't react. Hold position." Inside the Empire's fleet, laughter spread among the officers. To them, this was a game. They didn't expect resistance, and they expected fear. But the humans did not flee. The Valiant stayed where it was, small and still, facing a wall of firepower without moving an inch. This confused the Imperial commanders. "Why aren't they running?" one asked. Admiral Zarthan narrowed his eyes. "Perhaps they're too foolish to know they're doomed." Back on the Valiant, the crew worked quickly but quietly. Ensign Patel checked the shields. Lieutenant Kim monitored the weapons, and the engineer, Chief Ortega, adjusted the power systems to maintain maximum energy efficiency. Everyone knew they couldn't win a battle against 50 warships, but they refused to show weakness. "Captain," Ortega said nervously, "if they hit us directly, our shields won't hold for more than a few seconds." Hale nodded. "Then we make sure they don't hit us, and if they do, we make it count." Hale stood at the center of the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back. He wasn't just thinking about the ship, he was thinking about Earth. Millions of people back home had no idea what was happening. This was humanity's first contact with an interstellar empire, and it was going horribly wrong. If they failed, Earth might never know why. But if they stood strong even in defeat, they would show the universe what kind of beings humans were. Brave, defiant, and unbroken. He turned to his communication officer. "Send a message to Earth Command," he said. "Let them know we've made contact with a hostile power. Tell them we won't surrender." The message was sent through the long-range relay. It would take days to reach Earth, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that their words were spoken, that humanity's first words to the stars were words of courage, not fear. Minutes passed. Then another transmission came from the Empire. This time Admiral Zarthan's tone was colder. "Human vessel," he said, "your refusal has been noted. You will now witness the consequences of defiance." Behind him, the glow of weapon systems began to light up the darkness of space. Dozens of Imperial ships aimed their cannons directly at the Valiant. The crew could see the power readings spike across their screens. Sarah's voice cracked slightly as she reported, "Captain, they're charging all main weapons." Hale nodded slowly. "So it begins." He looked around the bridge at his crew, men and women who had signed up for exploration, not war. Yet none of them showed weakness. Even those who were afraid stood at their posts, determined to face whatever came. "We've faced worse odds in history," Hale said quietly. "We've survived world wars, disasters, and extinction-level events. This is just another challenge. If they think humanity will fall easily, they don't know who we are." As the Imperial fleet prepared to fire, Hale made a decision. "Arm the graviton lance," he said softly. The crew turned to him in surprise. That weapon was experimental, unstable and untested in real combat. It had been created for planetary defense, not ship-to-ship battle. Ortega hesitated. "Sir, if we use it now, we could overload the core." Hale met his gaze steadily. "If we do nothing, we die anyway. I'd rather go down fighting than on my knees." Ortega nodded and began to power up the weapon. The Valiant's systems hummed louder. Lights flickered. The ship itself seemed to shiver as energy built up deep within its core. The crew could feel the vibration through the floor. Outside, the Empire's sensors detected the sudden rise in energy. "What are they doing?" one of the Imperial officers asked. Admiral Zarthan frowned. "It's a bluff. They don't have the power to hurt us." He ordered his fleet to prepare for a final strike. Back on the Valiant, Hale took a deep breath. "Hold fire," he said. "Not yet. Let them make the first move." The Imperial fleet didn't wait long. A moment later, Dozens of beams of light shot through space, converging toward the human ship. The stars lit up like a storm of fire. The crew braced for impact. The first blast hit the shields, shaking the Valiant violently. Sparks flew across the bridge and alarms blared. "Shields down to 60%, Sarah shouted. The next hit dropped them to 40. "We can't take much more," Ortega yelled over the noise. Through the chaos, Hale stood unmoving, watching the tactical display. "Wait," he said again. His eyes focused on the flagship Imperator's Wrath, leading the assault. It was the heart of the enemy formation. "Now," he said finally, "target their flagship." Ortega hit the command. The graviton lance charged to full power. For a heartbeat, everything went silent. Then the weapon fired. A beam of blinding energy burst from the Valiant, tearing through the darkness. The Imperial fleet's sensors went wild. The beam moved faster than light could travel. It struck the Imperator's Wrath head-on, slicing through its thick armor as if it were paper. The entire ship split apart in a single flash of light. The explosion that followed lit the sky brighter than any sun. Shockwaves rippled through the nearby ships, sending them spinning. For the first time in their history, the Galactic Empire witnessed the destruction of one of its strongest warships by a vessel from an unknown, primitive world. On the Valiant, silence filled the bridge. The crew stared at the screen, unable to believe what they had just done. "Direct hit," Sarah whispered. "Target destroyed." Hale didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He simply said, "Hold your fire." No more. He knew this victory was not about revenge, it was about sending a message. Across the Imperial fleet, panic erupted. Officers shouted orders, trying to make sense of what had just happened. "It's impossible," one screamed. No single ship could have done that. Admiral Zarthan was gone, his ship vaporized, and the Empire's chain of command was in chaos. One by one, their ships began to retreat. None of them dared to fire again. The humans had done the unthinkable. They had stood against the Empire and survived. Inside the Valiant, the crew let out shaky breaths. Some cried quietly, others just stared in awe. Hale looked out into the stars and spoke softly. "We came in peace. They forced us to fight. But now they know. Humanity will never bow." In that moment, far away from their home world, the humans had changed galactic history forever. What began as an ultimatum had become a warning to all who underestimated them. The moment the Valiant fired its graviton lance, the universe seemed to stop breathing. For a fraction of a second, the beam was so bright that even the stars around it faded. The Imperial fleet watched in disbelief as the thin line of energy cut through their flagship like a blade through glass. The Imperator's Wrath, a warship feared across the galaxy, simply came apart. Its armor melted, its reactors burst, and its enormous frame was torn into glowing fragments. The explosion that followed was silent in the vacuum of space, but its light filled the void with a blinding glow. Every Imperial ship in the area witnessed it, and in that single moment, the mighty Galactic Empire felt fear for the first time in centuries. Inside the Valiant, the crew were frozen. The shaking had stopped, the alarms had gone quiet, and yet no one spoke. Captain Hale stood motionless, staring at the view screen where the enemy flagship had been seconds before. Now there was only debris and drifting metal. "The report," he said finally, his voice low but steady. Lieutenant Kim's hands trembled slightly as she checked her console. "Direct hit," she whispered. "Target destroyed. Multiple secondary explosions detected. Enemy fleet in disarray." Hale closed his eyes for a second. He knew what had just happened would echo across the galaxy, but he also knew it came at a price. "Status of our systems?" he asked. Chief Ortega replied, sweat running down his face. "Graviton lance offline, sir. Power core's unstable but holding. We pushed it to the limit. One more shot like that and she might not hold together." The bridge was filled with a strange quiet. Not joy, not fear, but awe. They had done the impossible. A small ship from a young world had destroyed a ship that entire civilizations had bowed to. The crew looked at their captain, waiting for his next command. Hale took a deep breath. "No one fires another shot," he said. "We came here for peace and we'll leave with it." He looked out at the enemy ships still surrounding them. They were moving in confusion now, their formation broken. Some were retreating. Others stood still, unsure of what to do. "They don't know whether to run or to fight," Sarah said softly. "Good," Hale replied. "Let them decide what kind of empire they really are." In the Imperial fleet, chaos reigned. Officers shouted over one another. trying to make sense of what had just happened. "Admiral Zarthan's ship is gone. No survivors," one of them reported. "What kind of weapon was that?" another shouted. "No known energy signature matches it." Fear spread quickly. The Imperial commanders had never faced an enemy who could strike them like this. Their fleets were built for intimidation, not defense. They had always been the hunters. Now for the first time, they were the prey. The Vice Admiral, now the ranking officer, struggled to regain control. "Form defensive positions," he barked. "We will not flee from primitives." But even as he said it, his voice shook. On the Valiant, the crew watched as some Imperial ships slowly drifted backward, their weapons powered down. Others, still loyal to the old arrogance, kept their cannons aimed at the human ship. The captain understood what they were thinking. If they fired again, they might die, but their pride wouldn't let them back down easily. Hale stood tall, his eyes on the screen. "Open the channel," he ordered. The communication officer nodded and opened a wide transmission. Hale's voice spread through the void, reaching every Imperial ship. "This is Captain Marcus Hale of the human ship Valiant," he began. "We came in peace. You attacked us without cause. We defended ourselves, nothing more. We will not pursue you, and we will not destroy you. But know this, and if you ever threaten humanity again, we will respond. And next time there will be no warning." His words echoed across the Imperial fleet. For a long moment there was no reply. The Empire had never been spoken to like this, not by anyone. On one of the enemy bridges, a young Imperial officer whispered, "He spared us, after destroying our flagship." That thought spread among the crew members like fire. They had been taught that mercy was weakness, but now they were starting to see it differently. The humans had shown strength beyond imagination, and restraint beyond pride. Back on the Valiant, Chief Ortega looked at the captain and said quietly, "They're not firing, sir." Hale nodded. "They've learned enough for today." The crew began to relax, their fear replaced with disbelief and exhaustion. Sarah Kim slumped into her chair, still shaking slightly. "We actually did it," she murmured. "We stood against an empire, and survived." Hale placed a hand on her shoulder. "We didn't win a war, Lieutenant," he said softly. "We just avoided one." His words carried the heavy truth that none of them could ignore. They were alive, but the galaxy had just changed forever. Far away, the explosion of the Imperator's wrath was being recorded by Imperial monitoring stations and long-range scanners. The data spread quickly through communication networks, faster than anyone could contain it. Within hours, the story began to travel. An unknown species had destroyed an Imperial flagship. Some called it a lie. Others called it prophecy. On planets under Imperial rule, whispers began to grow. A new species, they said, a small one from a distant world. They destroyed the Empire's greatest ship. To slaves, it was a spark of hope. To soldiers, it was a rumor that filled them with unease. To the Imperial Council, it was an unthinkable embarrassment. In the central world of the Empire, the High Council met in secret. Holograms of the destroyed flagship flickered before them. "This cannot be true," one council member said in disbelief. "No species this young could possess such power." Another replied bitterly, "And yet the data does not lie. The Imperator's wrath is gone. 50 ships witnessed it." The Emperor himself sat in silence, his golden eyes narrowing. "Find out who they are," he said finally. "Find Earth. Learn their history, their technology, their weakness. And above all, learn their courage, because no one does something like this without believing in something greater than themselves." Meanwhile, the Valiant drifted in the quiet aftermath of the battle. The stars around them seemed peaceful again, as if the universe itself was resting after what it had witnessed. The crew moved slowly through the ship, repairing what they could. The lights flickered. The air smelled faintly of smoke, and yet there was relief in every face. "We should be dead," Ortega said, shaking his head. "But we're not." Hale gave a faint smile. "Sometimes surviving is the best victory," he replied. Late into the ship's artificial night cycle, Hale sat alone in his cabin looking at a small picture of Earth, the blue and green planet hanging in darkness. "They'll come for us now," he thought. "They won't forget this." But another thought followed, stronger and prouder. "They'll remember what we are." He knew the Empire would spread lies, maybe even threaten Earth one day, but they would never again see humanity as weak or unworthy. That single act, that one shot, had changed the balance of fear in the galaxy. Back in the Imperial fleet, the survivors began their retreat. The damaged ships limped away, carrying the story of their defeat. Some officers still tried to make excuses. It must have been luck, they said. A fluke. But deep down they all knew the truth. Humanity had faced them and won through sheer determination. The Vice Admiral, still pale from shock, made his final order. "Do not engage them again," he said. "Not until we understand what they are capable of." The Valiant's crew watched as the last of the enemy ships vanished into hyperspace. The stars were quiet again. A cheer rose softly from the engineering deck, then from the bridge, spreading through the ship like a wave. For the first time since the battle began, people smiled. Some laughed, some cried, and others simply stared in silence, realizing they had survived something legendary. Hale allowed himself a small smile too. "We've made history," he said quietly. "But let's make sure we survive it." Hours later, the ship's systems stabilized. Ortega reported that the Graviton Lance would need weeks of repair, but the main engines were functional. "We can go home," he said. Hale nodded. "Set course for Earth." As the Valiant turned toward its home world, the crew looked back one last time at the distant wreckage of the Imperator's Wrath. It floated quietly in space, surrounded by shards of gold and fire, the remains of an empire's pride. None of them realized it yet, but across countless worlds the story of the human ship was already spreading. It would be told in whispers, in songs, in secret meetings between rebels and soldiers alike. The day humanity's warship faced the Empire and lived would become a legend, one that would remind the galaxy that courage, when born from conviction, could be stronger than any weapon. And though the Valiant disappeared into the stars, the fear it left behind would linger in every Imperial heart, marking the beginning of a new chapter in galactic history, the day when humanity's light first cast a shadow on an empire built on fear. The news spread across the galaxy faster than light. It began as a rumor whispered among traders, then turned into confirmed reports from military outposts and colonies. The mighty Galactic Empire's flagship, Imperator's Wrath, had been destroyed, not by another empire, not by a rebellion, but by a single small ship from an unknown world. At first, most people didn't believe it. How could such a thing be true? The Empire had ruled for centuries, undefeated and unquestioned. Their technology was said to be the most advanced in the known universe. But the evidence could not be denied. The wreckage was real, the data logs were verified, and the sensor records from dozens of ships told the same story. A human warship called the USS Valiant had defeated the pride of the Empire in one impossible shot. On the Imperial homeworld, fear began to spread among the high ranks. The Emperor sat on his throne, surrounded by trembling advisors. His golden robe shimmered under the hall's light, but his eyes were dark with anger. "A single ship?" he repeated slowly. "A single ship destroyed the Imperator's Wrath?" The commander before him bowed deeply. "Yes, my Emperor. The reports are confirmed. We believe it was an experimental weapon. The humans call it a Graviton Lance." The Emperor's hand tightened into a fist. "Find out everything about this species," he ordered coldly. "Where they come from, what they believe, and how they built such power. I want answers, not excuses." His voice echoed through the vast hall like thunder. But fear wasn't only growing in the Emperor's palace. It was spreading through the streets, the barracks, and even the outer colonies. Soldiers whispered among themselves, questioning everything they had been taught. If a small world like Earth could do that, one soldier muttered to another, what else could they be hiding? On mining planets and slave worlds, the story took on a new meaning. People who had lived under the Empire's cruelty for generations began to feel something they hadn't felt in years: hope. The humans fought them, they said quietly, and they won. For the oppressed, the humans were no longer just another alien species. They were a symbol of resistance. Meanwhile, on the Valiant, the crew drifted in silence. The stars outside looked calm, but everyone on board knew that the storm they had unleashed was only beginning. Captain Hale stood on the bridge, his face serious and thoughtful. "They'll see us as a threat now," he said quietly. "The Empire won't forget this. We've shown them something they didn't believe possible: fear." Lieutenant Sarah Kim nodded slowly. "Sir, do you think they'll attack Earth?" Hale didn't answer right away. He stared at the endless void ahead, his mind full of heavy thoughts. "Maybe," he finally said. "Or maybe they'll think twice before doing it. Either way, Humanity has just stepped into the light and the galaxy is watching. Messages began flooding through the long-range comm systems. Some were from curious civilizations asking about the humans' technology. Others were from frightened diplomats begging them not to start a war. But the most surprising messages came from the Empire itself. Their commanders claimed the incident had been a tragic misunderstanding and insisted they wanted peace. Hale read the words carefully and shook his head. "They're not apologizing," he said to his officers. "They're covering their fear." He could see it clearly. The Empire wasn't sorry for attacking them. They were terrified of what might happen if they attacked again. Far away in the Imperial Military Command, officers debated what to do next. "We cannot show weakness," one shouted. "If the galaxy sees that we were defeated, they'll rise against us." Another officer slammed his hand on the table. "But if we attack again and lose, it will destroy us completely." The room fell silent. No one wanted to admit it, but they all knew the truth. For the first time, they were afraid of an enemy smaller than themselves. Finally, the Grand Marshal spoke. "We will not retaliate, not now. We will regroup, study their technology, and prepare." His voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly, and above all, no one speaks of fear. Despite the official silence, the story kept spreading. Merchants carried it to every port. Smugglers repeated it in dark corners, and even children began to play games pretending to be human warriors who could defeat empires. On one distant colony world, a miner whispered to his son, "Remember this, boy. Somewhere out there's a world where people don't bow to empires. That world is called Earth." Hope was a dangerous thing for the Empire, and now it was growing everywhere. Back on the Valiant, the crew watched the growing reaction with mixed feelings. Sarah Kim smiled as she read a report from a distant colony. "They're calling us the ship that humbled the stars," she said softly. Chief Ortega laughed weakly. "Humbled the stars? We almost blew ourselves apart doing it." The laughter faded as they all remembered the cost. Several systems were damaged beyond repair, and half the crew hadn't slept in days. "We may have survived," Ortega continued, "but we're not heroes, Captain. We were just lucky." Hale turned to him and shook his head. "No, Chief, luck doesn't make history. Courage does." Later that night, Hale recorded a message for Earth Command. "We faced the Empire and survived," he said into the recorder. "But understand this, they are not gods. They bleed, they fear, and they can be defeated. The galaxy isn't as untouchable as we once thought, but now that they know us, the danger is greater. We must be ready not for conquest, but for defense." When he finished, he sat quietly, staring at the message before sending it. He knew that his words would change how Earth saw itself. Humanity was no longer just exploring the stars. They were part of the galactic story now. In the Empire, panic grew among the High Command. The Emperor ordered his spies to gather every piece of data about humanity. Reports came back one by one. Humanity was young, reckless, emotional, but also unbelievably adaptable. They had survived on a dangerous planet full of storms, wars, and chaos, and yet they had risen to the stars. "They are unpredictable," one scientist reported. "They fight even when they know they will lose. They call it hope." The Emperor's eyes narrowed. "Hope," he repeated slowly. "A dangerous word. Too dangerous to spread." He ordered strict censorship across the Empire. Anyone caught speaking of the Valiant or the humans would be punished. But it was too late. The idea had already escaped. Weeks passed. Across the galaxy, the Empire's enemies began to move quietly. Old rebellions that had been silent for years started to rise again, inspired by the humans' victory. In hidden corners of space, resistance leaders whispered to their followers, "If they can stand against the Empire, so can we." The Imperial fleets were stretched thin, trying to keep control. Everywhere they went, they heard the same phrase repeated, "We are not afraid anymore." On the Valiant, repairs continued. The ship bore scars from the battle, burned panels, cracked hull plating, and a power system that needed constant care. But the crew walked with their heads higher now. They had faced the worst and lived to tell the tale. One evening, Sarah stood by the observation window, watching a distant nebula glow in the darkness. "Do you think they'll come after us again?" she asked quietly. Hale joined her, his reflection calm in the glass. "Maybe," he said. "But next time we won't be alone. The galaxy has seen what we can do. Some will fear us, some will hate us, but others, they'll stand with us." Back on the Imperial capital, the Emperor stared at the hologram of the destroyed Imperator's wrath. The image floated before him, a reminder of his first defeat. The day the galaxy feared humanity, he muttered bitterly. His advisors bowed their heads, saying nothing. He turned away, his long cloak sweeping across the floor. If they want to be feared, he said softly, then we will give them something to fear in return. But deep inside, he knew the truth. It wasn't humanity's weapon that had shaken his empire. It was their spirit. Across the galaxy, the legend of the USS Valiant grew. Traders told stories of its captain's bravery. Rebels painted its image on their walls, and scholars debated how a small world could create such strength. Some said it was the weapon that made them powerful. Others believed it was something deeper, something in their nature. Humans fight because they must, one alien historian wrote. But they also fight because they believe they can change the impossible. And so, even as the Empire tried to silence the tale, it continued to spread, from world to world, from ship to ship, from heart to heart. The galaxy had learned something new that day. It had learned that power alone was not enough to rule, and fear alone was not enough to control. Humanity had reminded them that courage could live even in the smallest of lights, and that sometimes, one spark could set the entire universe on fire. The USS Valiant moved quietly through the void of space, leaving behind a trail of astonishment and fear that stretched across the galaxy. The crew had survived what no one thought possible. They had faced the greatest warship of the Galactic Empire and lived. Yet there was no celebration, no loud cheers. Instead, there was a deep, quiet sense of accomplishment. Captain Marcus Hale walked through the bridge, observing his crew as they repaired systems, recalibrated shields, and tended to minor injuries. Each person moved with a sense of pride, tempered with the knowledge that what they had done would change the galaxy forever. They were no longer explorers alone. They had become symbols of something much greater, humanity itself. The humans knew that the Empire would not forget them. Every officer, soldier, and citizen within the Imperial ranks had seen what a single human warship could do. Fear had entered the hearts of those who had never known defeat. But the crew also knew that victory in battle was only one part of the story. How they conducted themselves afterward would define humanity's reputation for centuries to come. Captain Hale understood this, and he addressed the bridge quietly. "We didn't destroy the Empire," he said, his voice calm but firm. "We showed them we will defend ourselves. That's enough for now. Our job is to survive and to make sure humanity remains safe." For days, the Valiant traveled home, avoiding Imperial patrols and using stealth routes to ensure they were not followed. Every system aboard the ship had been tested to its limits during the battle, and the engineers worked tirelessly to repair the damage. Sparks flew from control panels, alarms occasionally rang out, and the hum of the engines carried a tension that was both familiar and comforting. The crew had become a family, bound together not just by duty but by the shared experience of facing impossible odds and surviving. Even the youngest ensigns, who had been terrified at the start, now moved with confidence, learning to trust their instincts and their ship as extensions of themselves. Meanwhile, the news of the Valiant's victory had spread throughout the galaxy. Across countless star systems, humans were no longer seen as primitive or weak. Traders, explorers, and even distant alien civilizations now whispered of Earth's courage. Stories circulated of a small ship that defied a mighty empire and survived. In Imperial sectors, commanders debated how to respond to this new, unpredictable threat. Some urged preparation for immediate retaliation, while others argued for caution. The Empire had learned that power alone could not command obedience. Courage could disrupt even the strongest fleet. The name humanity became synonymous with unpredictability and determination. Back on the ship, the crew began to feel the weight of their newfound fame. Messages from Earth Command started arriving, filled with admiration, concern, and curiosity. Scientists wanted to know how the graviton lance worked. Politicians debated what the encounter meant for Earth's place in the galaxy. Journalists prepared stories that would inspire generations. Captain Hale read these messages with a mixture of pride and caution. He knew that while recognition was gratifying, it also brought responsibility. Humanity had shown its strength, but the galaxy was vast and threats were never-ending. As they approached the outer limits of their solar system, Hale took a moment to reflect. "We didn't just win a battle," he said quietly to himself as he gazed out the observation window. "We proved something far more important, that humanity cannot be underestimated." He thought of every person on the ship, of their courage, their intelligence, and their determination. They had faced overwhelming odds, yet they had acted with precision, restraint, and integrity. This was what would define them in history, not just the destruction of a warship. On Earth, the news of the encounter ignited a mixture of awe and determination. People watched broadcasts, listened to reports, and read accounts of the Valiant's mission. Children dreamed of becoming explorers and defenders inspired by the bravery of the crew. Scientists pushed harder to understand the technologies that made such feats possible. Politicians debated how Earth should prepare for future encounters with extraterrestrial powers. The incident had done more than just demonstrate military capability. It had changed the way humanity saw itself. For the first time, humans truly understood that they could stand against forces far greater than themselves and live to tell the story. The crew's return journey was not without challenges. They encountered minor skirmishes with Imperial scouts, navigated through hazardous asteroid fields, and repaired failing systems along the way. Each obstacle reminded them that the galaxy was a dangerous place and that their fight was far from over. Yet, with each challenge, they grew stronger, their confidence solidifying. The crew learned to move as one, each member anticipating the needs of the others, and together they transformed the Valiant from a simple exploratory ship into a symbol of unity and resilience. During one particularly long shift, Captain Hale gathered his crew for a quiet meeting. "We've achieved something extraordinary," he said. "But remember, courage is not measured in victories alone. It is measured in the choices we make when faced with fear. We chose to act with honor. That is why the galaxy will remember us." The crew listened intently, understanding the weight of his words. They were not just a ship and its crew anymore. They were the embodiment of humanity's spirit, a force that could inspire, intimidate, and command respect across the stars. As the Valiant finally entered the outer orbit of Earth's solar system, the crew could see the familiar blue and green planet growing larger in the viewports. The sight brought an overwhelming sense of relief and accomplishment. Messages from Earth Command confirmed their safe return was being coordinated. Even though the galaxy now knew of humanity's strength, the crew understood that Earth itself was not yet ready to face the full consequences of their actions. It would be up to generations of humans to learn from this encounter, to prepare wisely, and to carry forward the lessons of courage, restraint, and unity. Once the Valiant landed safely at its assigned docking station, the crew disembarked to the applause of officials, scientists, and civilians alike. Yet there were no parades, no extravagant celebrations. Humanity had won respect, not glory. Captain Hale walked among his crew, silently acknowledging each member's contribution. The engineers who had pushed the ship to its limits, the pilots who had maneuvered through impossible situations, the communications officers who had negotiated and coordinated under pressure. Every individual played a part in what had become a defining moment in human history. In the days that followed, the story of the Valiant spread like wildfire. It was told in classrooms, debated in scientific forums, and analyzed in military academies. Every detail of the encounter, from the strategic decisions on the bridge to the use of the experimental graviton lance, became a lesson in bravery, ingenuity, and calculated risk. Humanity's reputation in the galaxy had changed overnight. No longer were humans considered a minor primitive species. They were now seen as capable, unpredictable, and fearless, a force that could not be ignored or underestimated. Captain Hale, however, remained humble. He often walked alone at night, looking up at the stars, contemplating the magnitude of what had occurred. "This is only the beginning," he said quietly. "We've made our mark. But the galaxy is vast, and the challenges ahead will be greater than anything we've faced. We must remain vigilant, strong, and united." His words were both a reflection and a warning. Courage had brought them victory, but it would be their wisdom, cooperation, and foresight that would determine humanity's place in the cosmos. As time passed, the legend of the Valiant grew beyond the crew. Across the galaxy, stories were told of a small human warship that dared to stand against the mightiest empire in existence and survived. Those stories inspired fear in those who sought to dominate and hope in those who yearned for freedom. The galaxy had learned a crucial lesson, that power alone could not command respect, and that a small determined force acting with courage and honor could change the course of history. Humanity's message was clear. They were not to be underestimated, and they would defend their place in the stars with unwavering resolve. Though the Valiant would continue its missions, exploring new regions of space and advancing humanity's knowledge, its first encounter with the Galactic Empire would remain the defining moment of its legacy. It was not simply the destruction of a warship that mattered, but the way humans had conducted themselves afterward, with restraint, with courage, and with a sense of responsibility that left an indelible mark on the galaxy. Every alien civilization that learned of the event began to reconsider humanity, realizing that beneath the small blue planet was a species capable of extraordinary feats, driven not by conquest but by an unyielding spirit and an unwavering belief in themselves. And so Captain Hale and his crew returned to their lives, forever changed by the events that had unfolded. They had survived, they had proven their worth, and they had left an unmistakable legacy. Across countless worlds, the story of humanity's courage and ingenuity spread, becoming a beacon of hope, a symbol of resistance, and a reminder to all that even the smallest ship, crewed by determined hearts, could alter the fate of empires. Humanity had stepped into the galactic stage not as conquerors, but as a species to be respected, feared, and remembered for all time.